Tense day in Washington as Election Day is upon us. The White House is President Obama's today, but tomorrow we will have a president-elect. The White House is quite empty as this is Election Day. President Obama is watching closely, just as the Clinton campaign is looking to see who will be the next president of the U.S. Clinton surrogates are not the only ones watching the polls today, but Trump supporters are keeping a close eye.
It's not for his own gain. What's he going to gain from it? He's not going to gain financially from it. Not at all. He's there to really show us what we can do, how we can really make it better.
We need change. I think Hillary's so corrupt. There's no way I can support her ethically. And I think that I truly believe he does support the American people.
The votes are being tallied across the U.S. We shall see who will be the next president of the United States of America. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Well, we're still following our coverage of, you're still watching our coverage of the U.S. elections live from our studios here in Lagos. And of course, we still have our gentlemen in the studio, Mr. Shobo and Mr. Chukwemeka Eze. Now, we've talked about President Barack Obama's legacies. We've talked about his weaknesses. We've talked about his strengths. Now, how can Hillary Clinton, that's if she becomes the next president of the United States, how can she build on some of these legacies that he's leaving behind, and how can she improve on some of these weaknesses that we've identified?
Yes, if you take Obamacare, Hillary Clinton will not repeal Obamacare. I know it's a redistribution policy whereby companies are compelled by law to pay what you regard as taxes, such that when people are sick, they will not die in hospital because they cannot pay. So it's a health insurance. So many people were dying because to get quality Medicare, especially of the tertiary type, was very difficult for many, especially the poor. So the GOP saw it and still sees it as a socialist phenomenon. And anything close to socialism, they detest it.
Even if it's public welfare?
Because they don't believe you should take from the rich to give to the poor. They believe that the poor should struggle and become rich.
But Donald Trump has actually talked about him increasing the taxes of the rich.
Sure. No. By increasing the taxes of the rich. In fact, he was accusing Clinton of about increasing taxes. So the methodology is yet to be seen. Because if you say you're increasing the tax of the rich, is it the personal income tax or the company income tax? Which tax or all the taxes? So until we get into the nitty-gritty, before we now know whether he has the same, but basically he differs from Clinton.
I actually think he said he wanted to
decrease,
to reduce.
That's the position.
Okay.
In fact, even tonight, I saw a clip where he was telling his supporters, that remember that Clinton will increase taxes. So that means he will decrease. But whether he will increase or decrease, one thing is certain. Clinton will retain Obamacare. Clinton will not say women who commit abortion should be punished.
Should be hanged.
In fact, Trump said women that commit abortion should get a form of punishment. So that will not happen. Then Clinton will use the period of his presidency to clean his Libyan mess. What I call his Libyan mess. So he will use that opportunity. Then the Iran deal, the Iran deal, nuclear deal, it is so much important to Obama. It is one of Obama's legacies. He does not want somebody who will negative that deal. And Clinton will retain that deal. So it does. That's why. But definitely, you know that Trump will abrogate that deal. So Clinton will maintain the status quo and use the opportunity to cleanse himself of his to clean herself of her iniquities, because she will use the time to revise history. Already, if you look at the trust question, she has a higher trust problem than Trump, notwithstanding that Trump has the real demand.
Now, let me just interrupt you. Now, we have correspondents in Washington, D.C., Maria Beth, joining us live on the program. Maria, thank you for joining us again on the program.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been quite an evening.
Yes, I can imagine. So what is the situation of things right now in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think the things in Washington right now are very much a watch and wait. We know that Maryland's already been called, which is the neighboring state to Washington. It's been called for Clinton. But we're seeing right now that Donald Trump is ahead of Clinton with electoral votes. It takes 270 electoral votes to win the election. It looks like Donald Trump is close to about 150 of those. And it looks like Hillary Clinton is just shy of 100. As you know, the news is breaking every moment. And while I'm talking to you, there could be new states that are being called. We know that Ohio is one they're watching very closely. As it's been stated time and time again, no Republican has ever won the White House without the state of Ohio. Florida keeps going back and forth. Florida is a little bit at this point. Donald Trump is ahead by a slight margin. We know he's taken over Kentucky. He's taken West Virginia. We know that some of the more typically Democratic states have been taken by Secretary Clinton, but it is going to be a long night. It is a very contested race at this point, and we just shall see. We shall see what happens next.
Well, there are some states that are rather too close to call, and would like to see if we can have some perspective on those states, what they are, and how the results are faring in those areas.
Well, as I stated, Ohio is the one right now that everyone is really watching. Obviously, areas in the Cleveland area are showing to be very heavily Democratic. More central of the state, it's showing to be still red, a bit Republican. Now, in the southern quarter of the state of Ohio, it's typically red, but it looks like it's going blue, which would be for the Democrats, for Secretary Clinton. So that state right now is not very predictable, just because things are very different than what we've seen in years past. Obviously, areas that were typically Republican are now going more Democratic, and obviously the other way as well. So that's a major issue for the state of Ohio. Now, Florida, obviously the areas like Dade County, but some of central Florida is really showing to be heavily Donald Trump. At this point, it's about a 1 to 2 point margin between the two, between Donald Trump and Secretary Clinton for the state of Florida. So those are the two right now that are heavily being watched. The West will become a bit of a conversation another hour or so as the night gets closer for that area of the country. So the West will begin to kind of come in, and we'll begin to talk more about what's going on in the West here in this short bit.
Well, we know for sure that a winner will definitely emerge, but then the way it's going, is it going to be very close to call? Is it going to be a very close race?
It's going to be a very close call, because you're seeing some of the larger states. It's neck and neck between Donald Trump and Secretary Clinton. It is not a clear win for either state. Virginia, which is obviously neighboring to Washington, you're seeing some of the suburban areas of Washington and Virginia that are going pretty Democratic and blue. But the other parts of Virginia, if you go more toward the middle of the state, it's being heavily Republican. And so Virginia is typically a Republican state, a red state.
What factor has race played in all of these? I mean, that's a very sensitive issue, but then what role has it played in, the pattern of voting?
You know, race has played a heavy part in this. The real question is, you know, not only is that we're talking about African Americans and Caucasians, but where the Hispanic vote has been a clear, a big part of this. As we all know, many Hispanics have been a little disappointed in some of what candidate Donald Trump has been stating over the past few months during his campaign. And so they have come out in heavy numbers to vote. Now, the question is, are they going to be able to sway the vote? That's what only time can tell. Now, the unfortunate piece, when you look at the African American population in the U.S., the numbers are pretty much showing now that the same type of voter turnout that we saw in 2008 and 2012 for President Obama isn't quite there. Many have decided to hold their vote. As we know, there have been many activists in the African American community that have asked that people not hold their vote just because they're not happy with either candidate. But it is definitely playing a major role. And I think either way this election goes, it will be a big time for healing in the United States, especially with race relations.
I would like to say thank you very much, Maria, for the update on the, well, the incoming results and how it's looking, the predictions and projections. But of course, rest assured, we are definitely going to be staying until everything comes in, and we definitely will be getting back to you at some point.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So we take a moment now, and when we return, it is the continuation of the coverage live of the United States presidential election 2016 here on Channels Television. We'll be right back.